I want to talk about Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal again. So on the planet Thra, which is just an anagram for Earth, because it's a fantasy movie. On the planet Thra, there are two groups of people. Well, there's a lot of different creatures and races on the planet Thra. And there are the Skeksis. And the Skeksis, some of them are good and some of them are evil. And then there's podlings. And there's the gelflings. The gelflings have been exterminated. And what's been put in their place are the pod people. And the pod people pollute their rivers and they eat pee and poo. And they worship a pantheon of demons. Also, they worship the Skeksis. The Skeksis is one group of people, but they're divided. There's the gentle, not evil Urus. And then there's the evil Skeksis. And I'll describe what they look like. I'll show images to help it be more clear. But the Skeksis are evil, hook-nosed, bejeweled bird creatures. And I guess you could say they represent the elite. And what they do is they live in a crystal castle in the desert. And they drain the vital essence of all the other creatures on the planet. They think that they're chosen to rule the planet and everything that's on it is for them. So they literally have technology that drains the vital essence of all the other creatures on the planet. They have all these different ways to harvest energy. But you know, since it's a fantasy movie, they just put them in a chair and they drain their vital essence out of them and make them lifeless zombies. They make them into the pod people. I guess you could say it's a form of repression. Then the Skeksis take the pod people and they exported them to the whole rest of the planet Thra to wipe out the gelflings. The gelflings were the old noblemen, so they want a slower, dumber group of people. And it's not that any of the races on the planet Thra are like, you know, everybody could be equal and have a chance at ruling, but what they want is they took a bunch of people and they repressed them. This is the evil Skeksis. The Urus and the Urus are the Skeksis. It's just basically one group of people. But in Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal, they break them into two groups, the Skeksis, so that you can see that some of these people, like the Urus, have big noses too, but they're not evil. I don't know how else to put it. They have the big noses and everything, and but they're not evil. But the Skeksis live in a crystal castle in the desert. and they're stockpiling weapons. They put cameras everywhere, but in the world of the Dark Crystal, the cameras are called crystal bats. So it's just like these bats that don't have bodies. There's bats with like a purple gemstone in the middle, and the Skeksis are all named like Skek this and Skek that, and that's how you can tell who's the Skeksis. Because they have like this prefix of Skeks in front of their names. It's kind of like a surname. Like in our world we have surnames. Like for example, there's one group of people and their surnames they're all named after like gemstones and precious metals and gemstones and things like that. And so the evil Skeksis, this is Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal. This is his story, by the way. And I think the movie came out in like 1981, and I just want to talk about what the movie's about. So the Skeksis are like drop shipping podlings all over the planet. They also just have crab people. And the crab people are under their control, as well as the pod people. And the pod people kiss the ass of the evil Skeksis. And they'll even kind of kiss the ass of the Urus, but the Urus don't necessarily have power. The Skeksis have the power, and they live in a crystal castle in the middle of the desert, and they don't let anybody in there, and they don't have to give up like census numbers or anything. And this is a movie, like I think it came out in like 1981 or 1982, Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal. So it's about killing all the Gelflings. And in the movie, most of the Gelflings have already been replaced. And all that's left are some of the Urus who are part of the Urskeks, which is like one race. There's a lot of Gnostic stuff in this. A lot of Kabbalah stuff in the Dark Crystal. Anyway, the Skeksis live in a crystal castle in the desert, and they have these pointy beaks, and they're bird-nosed creatures, and they're like, you know, typical villains that you would see in a movie for children. And they go, yes, let me see what I can do, yes, oi, and all this stuff. And that's how the Skeksis talk. And they're like, oh, maybe you would like me to do this then. And that's how the Skeksis talk. And they're like, they drain the vital essence of all the creatures on the planet. Do you understand what I'm saying here? So, the pod people have the highest population in the world of the planet Thra. So they're like doing air shipping, drop shipments of pod people. Remember the story of the pod people? It was like a 1950s movie. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's the movie about the pod people. So I guess you could say, if you came from a Christian religious perspective, you could say that the pod people is about demonic possession. And yet in the planet Thra, the pod people worship a pantheon of demons. And they have festivals where they throw around feces of other beasts of the planet Thra. Like they have these creatures there called the Walks, which I think is just like an anagram for cow or something. So they have the pod people, or is it Papadod? I can't remember. Papads? What do they call? I forget. Anyway, they have like a dung. Instead of calling it poop, they call it dung. This is a Jim Henson's fantasy movie. And they throw poop at each other, and they don't use toilets. And the Gelflings were deceived. They're like, yeah, well, everybody needs a place to live. You guys can come live with us. We know that you come from the most densely populated country on the planet, Thra. So people all over the world welcome them into their country. And then the Skeksis manipulated the corporations in the different nations to usurp all the Gelfling noblemen. And the Gelflings look a lot different than the pod people. You can see that. So I guess you could say that on the planet Thra, and this is Jim Henson puppet movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. The Gelflings are represented by like kind of being pretty, like by the time you see the movie The Dark Crystal, there's only 2 Gelflings left. One has long brown hair, pale skin, and then the other one is a female, and she has blonde hair and blue eyes and pale skin. And they're the last 2 on the planet because they've all been killed and raped and murdered and, you know, like wiped off the face of the planet, and they've been replaced with pod people who are simple and they don't know anything because they've been repressed and held down. And the religion of the pod people is worshiping a pantheon of demons. And if there's one thing that the pod people really love, it's being subservient to the Skeksis, because the pod people know who's in charge. And they eat pee and poo. And they throw it at each other, and they worship demons. So since they worship demons, and they have all kinds of festivals where they dress up like demons, the pod people are possessed by demons. So it's not necessarily that the pod people in themselves are evil, it's just that they've kind of been programmed, because the Skeksis, who are the evil hook-nosed bejeweled creatures that go yes, and they do rituals. I'll show some images that you've been seeing slides. So they do these weird occult rituals, and it's weird because, you know, like in our world, it's kind of like the world of the Dark Crystal of the planet Thra is kind of like a reflection of our own world. And, you know, like some places where different people worship, the floor looks like the floor where the Skeksis worship, and that's where they do their occult rituals. And they drain the vital essence of everything else on the planet, because they're the Skeksis, they're in charge, and everything is about paying tribute to them. Defend us, protect us. And that's how the Skeksis operate. And they trick a lot of people. And sadly for the planet Thra, the Gelflings fell right into the plans of the Skeksis until they were just wiped off the face of the earth. And the whole story of the fantasy story of the Dark Crystal is that there's only 2 Gelflings left. And they have long straight hair, and they're hidden. They have to be hidden to be protected. Oddly enough, they're hidden by the Urus, who are not the evil Urskeks. They're just a people divided amongst themselves. And the Skeksis don't recognize God. They do rituals. They do magic. They have their own kind of magic. They do called Skeksis of magic. And they have 2 locks of hair on the sides of their head. Anyway, so the Skeksis are creatures. I'll show you another image of them, of the Skeksis. And yeah, so the pod people, let's talk about them again. The pod people, you know, a lot of them are poor. It's the most densely populated, before the Gelflings were exterminated and wiped off the face of the planet. Where the pod people are from is just the most densely populated country on the planet Thra. So they're looking for a hand up because there's so many people, and they're held down and repressed. It's a Skeksis social engineering technique where you take a people and you generationally repress them and hold them back so that you can use them as foot soldiers that will do whatever you say. So the Skeksis have been programmed. Again, they worship like a pantheon of demons, not unlike the Skeksis, who also themselves worship and venerate and do blood sacrifice to demons for all the power on the planet. Because I guess you could say, like I'll just use a metaphor, like there's a prince of the planet Thra, and he fell from the sky because the Skeksis are aliens. I don't know if you know this. But the Skeksis themselves worship Martians from outer space that fell down to Earth. And now these Martians kind of have an influence all over the world. And there's like a lot of these Martians that fell. And they're like, basically, I guess you could say the equivalent of demons in the real world. But I'm talking about Jim Henson fantasy movie. So the pod people that are being drop shipped all over the world to usurp the old, to wipe out the Gelflings, who have pale skin and blonde hair and blue eyes and all that. Let's see, okay, good, you got it. Like a tack hammer over your head. You know this already, but I just wanted to find a creative way to talk about it. So I don't know, is any of this sinking in? Probably, right? I don't know how else much more there is to say. So they take a people who worship demons, that are full of demons, and they export them all over the world. And the Skeksis know that the pod people will kiss their ass because they've been like mind wiped and they've been controlled. They worship ancient evil, and so they are puppeted. They're pod people. They're puppeted and drop shipped all over the world to exterminate the Gelflings. And then there are other races on the planet Thra, Jim Henson puppet creatures. And they're also being programmed to fight amongst themselves. And then they're taking people from the most densely populated country in the world and exporting them everywhere, because they know that they'll do the bidding of the evil Skeksis, because the pod people know who's really in charge. Maybe they're not very smart and they're horribly repressed people that worship demons and eat poop. And they're looking for a hand up in the world, and they're like, now it'll be our time. But when they take charge, it's going to be a downgrade for every other creature on the planet Thra. Because, you know, I always say this in a reflection of real life, even though I'm talking about a fantasy movie from 1981, in real life, I don't hate people. You know, maybe I do on an individual basis, even though God told us to love everybody. But what I really hate is programming. I hate how people are programmed. I say if you can deprogram a person or take the programming away, you can change them. And then, you know, you give them Jesus. I'll just say it like that. But we're talking about a Jim Henson fantasy movie, just so you know that I want to put religion aside and say that there are a lot of pod people who have come around to Jesus, a lot of them through near-death experiences, because sometimes that's what it takes. So what the Skeksis did was set up conditions for civil wars all over the planet. They're trying to create a new order to the planet Thra. So to do that, what they're doing is setting up a series of small-scale conflicts at all levels, at all times. And then the Skeksis also have plans to make people go crazy inside themselves, and they just use the same strategies, I imagine, that they do on our planet, on planet Earth. But on a planet Thra, they create a series of small-scale conflicts at all levels in every country, so that we're always fighting each other, and nobody pays attention to that it's the Skeksis that set all this up, and the Skeksis are like, what us? No, us, you have to protect us. And, you know, they look like this, and they're evil, and they kind of, you know, and they're the secret puppet masters behind everything on the planet. You're not supposed to talk about them. You're supposed to love them and honor them and venerate them. So the Skeksis know that the pod people, although they're not the brightest people on the planet, even though the Gelflings worldwide are being told that the Skeksis are so smart, and Elon Skeks is saying, oh, well, we don't have the labor. We need cheap labor, and we're at war with the other race of the how do you say Asia backwards? I don't know. So it's like, well, we need cheap labor. So they lie and they say, oh, these people are really smart. And why do they say they're really smart and export them all over the world? To put them in charge, because they kiss the ass of the Skeksis that live in the crystal castle in the desert, that drain the vital essence of all the other creatures on the planet. They drain their life force. So they're basically like vampires. The Skeksis are like vampires that are using magic and witchcraft and sorcery, stuff in the Bible that was forbidden to be done. And also, they rejected Jesus and they crucified him, and they don't want to let go of their power. And the Skeksis are also possessed by alien demons that fell to Earth. This is Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal. And they kind of like worship in the world of Thra, the Dark Crystal. The Skeksis also kind of basically worship the equivalent of the devil, but it's a fantasy movie. And I forget what they call the devil in the Dark Crystal movie. But anyway, they worship the devil, and they know who kisses their ass. And it's the most densely populated country in the world. And the Skeksis hate the pod people. And, you know, there's videos of this, of the pod people bowing down and worshiping the Skeksis, and the Skeksis are disgusted and they're shooing them in the ass and everything, and they hate the pod people, and they're nothing to them. They're just foot soldiers, and they don't respect them. They don't like them. They won't let them live with them. They're like, no, you can't. We don't need you in the Crystal Castle. And that's what's going on. So then there's the Urskeks, and the Urskeks are also being exterminated. Not the Urskeks, but the Urskeks is the people, and they all have the big noses, so they all look similar. But the gentle Urus are not evil. They're just Skeksis, a race divided amongst itself on the planet Thra. But the Skeksis don't mind. They'll serve up their Urus. They'll say, hey everybody, pay no attention to us. You have to defend us. The alien gods say that you need to protect us. We're the good Skeksis. We're the good Skeksis. We live in a crystal castle in the desert, but they're just Skeksis, and they're evil. And really, they worship. They're just magicians and sorcerers, and they do evil magic. And they drink blood, and they're vampires. But the Urus don't do any of that stuff. And they don't even, a lot of the Urus don't even know what the Skeksis are doing. They're just trying to get by because they're not rich, opulent, elite Skeksis that live in a crystal castle. They're just common people of the world in different countries and nations in the planet Thra. And the Skeksis have no qualms about offering up the Urus. No, go ahead, get them. You're right, they're terrible. But really, the Skeksis are the puppet masters of the puppets. And it's all puppets because it's hands. I don't know if you've ever seen a puppet movie, but they're all puppets. And the puppet's just a hand. It's a weird thing. I don't know if you've ever seen a Dark Crystal, but in case you never see it, I just wanted to tell you about that movie because that's what it's about. So if you want to know what it's about, that's what the Dark Crystal's about. And that's why everything that I described to you, that's what's happening in that movie. So I know I could say it more directly, and I'll probably just do that video too, but I wanted to do my movie review of the Dark Crystal to explain to you what it's about. So that's what's happening. If you wanted to know what's happening in that movie, and some people say life is a movie and we're living in it, that's what it's about. Why did the Skeksis export the pod people all over the world? Because they're manipulable, and putting them in charge of everything will be a downgrade for everybody. So the Skeksis will continue to make advancements in technology, however far you can go about it. And, you know, AI is a scam, and they just want people to invest in AI, but it probably has like a dead end and can only go so far because God only allows it to go so far. But if you need cheap labor, you bring that cheap labor in to other countries, and you usurp the people that, you know, it's the planet Thra. This is a Dark Crystal. Do you understand? You get it, right? Okay, good. That's the story of the Dark Crystal. Jim Henson's the Dark Crystal. And how does it end? I don't know. They did some bullshit with the Dark Crystal on Netflix, and I couldn't stand to watch like 12 hours or 8 hours or however many it was of a puppet movie. But I think it was just like BS propaganda and girl boss and destroy the patriarchy or something like that. So I don't know what the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance was about. But it doesn't matter because that Netflix Dark Crystal is not Jim Henson's Dark Crystal. I don't even know if it's Brian Henson's Dark Crystal, to be honest with you. But I'm one to talk about Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal, so we can put the Netflix stuff aside because I haven't seen it. I can't tell you about it. I'm sure the monsters and everything look cool because they got the original production designer to do the Age of Resistance, and the puppets are really cool, and they have like, you know, CG details added to them, so it looks really neat, right? But it's a hand. It's all just a hand, which is kind of weird. So, what am I talking about? I'm talking about puppets and puppet masters. And Jim Henson knew who the puppet masters were. And look at that, and look at that fantastic production design for the movie that was worked on toward. It was developed in the late 70s, and then it got on the screen in the early 1980s, and people didn't even know what the movie was about. It just became a cult classic, and you know, like, if there wasn't some kind of cult classic status to Jim Henson's original 1981 puppet, I don't know, masterpiece or whatever you want to call it. And then there's Labyrinth, which is about Eyes Wide Shut parties and for teenage girls, to warn them about that kind of stuff. So then there's Labyrinth. So Jim Henson is pretty good, you know, making movies for children. Or for families, I guess. Families, everybody, right? Everybody comes from a family or has a family. Even orphans will have some manner of family put together, even if it's like a Guardians of the Galaxy style family. So Jim Henson made family entertainment, and he was a Christian Science guy. And you know that they're a little weird? So there's a lot of weird Gnostic messages in the Dark Crystal. But I wanted to use the Dark Crystal as it's like a metaphor for our lives. And if you look at the Dark Crystal, you can see how it's a reflection on the world that we live in. Or maybe I'm just twisting the Dark Crystal from 1981. Maybe I'm twisting it and tweaking it a little bit for my purposes to talk about the world today. You don't know, it could be. So, I don't know, what do you think of my Dark Crystal review? Because I did another one. I did a previous one, and I thought I can review the Dark Crystal again. And so that's my Dark Crystal review. So in summation, what I want to say, the pod people are horribly repressed. They live in one of the most they live in the #1 most densely populated country in the world. They're repressed. A lot of them don't have anything. They kiss the ass of the Skeksis. They're looking for a hand up in the world. And they worship demons, so they're possessed of demons, so that has an influence over them. Are the pod people necessarily evil? I don't hate people, I hate the programming. I hate the programming that's been given to the pod people. Are all the pod people evil? No. You know, they're programmed and socially engineered. So again, I hate the programming, not the people. Are you gonna have to kick the pod people out? Yeah. They want a series of small-scale conflicts at all levels. So they said, you know, we gotta stop hiring gelflings. No gelflings. We have to give other people a chance. And it's just to have a downgrade. Globally, so that it's easier for the Skeksis to drain the vital essence off of all the creatures on the planet so they can have their 200-year rule or whatever. And if things don't work out with the Skeksis, they say, we've got the button, and they want to push the button. And, you know, like if they can't have their plan unfold, they just want to wipe everybody else off the planet and start over again. So that's the Skeksis. The Skeksis are evil, but the Urus and the Urskeks were one group of people, and then they split. And the Skeksis have all the power, and they live in the Crystal Castle. And the Urus, I know I keep saying it over and over again, but I'm just talking about the Dark Crystal. So the Urus, yeah, the Urus and the Skeksis have kind of the same religion, but there's stuff that the Skeksis do in the Crystal Castle, the wealthy elite whose fortune shaped the fates of nation on the planet Thra, that the Urus just don't do. A lot of Urus all over the planet Thra are poor, and the Skeksis, you know, like, there's been conflicts in the past. The Skeksis would check that they wanted to be able to identify who were the, you know, who they checked, they measured their teeth to see if they had canine teeth. all this stuff. It's crazy. So the Urus aren't safe either. The Skeksis will say, go get, if you want to get the people that are evil, get the Urus. And they don't mind setting up the Urus to be exterminated, like they want to do to the Gelflings. And then when everybody looks like pod people, then the Skeksis will know the difference between them and the people that they put in charge that kiss their ass, because they both worship demons. The pod people and the Skeksis. But the difference is that everyone on the planet Thra is being manipulated by the evil Skeksis who live in a castle in the desert, and they founded it in 1948 and everything like that. And they don't want, you know, and they just, they do whatever they want, and they want everybody to defend them. No, protect us. I don't mean any harm. Chamberlain is friend. That's, do you understand? So, and it's basically about vampires and stuff. Like, it's like a metaphor for vampires. And they want to exterminate the Gelflings, and the Gelflings have pale skin, and they're prettier than the Skeksis. Skeksis are these ugly birds with these beaks. They have these beaks coming out, and they go, oi! And they think that they're better than everybody else. And we drink the blood, and then we throw the bodies, and then they make sausage, and that's what the Skeksis do. But not every, you know, the Urus are also sort of like Skeksis, but they're not evil. So the Skeksis have no qualms about, no, you want to go after them. And it's just about wiping the Gelflings off the planet. And the Gelflings, again, the Gelfling women look like this. And they have like whitey natural hair styles. And just saying. So anyway, that's it. And also, the Skeksis they have tunnels under the ground in New York. And when they come out from the tunnels, they're like, ah, look, it's the Skeksis, and they're really gross looking and everything. Okay, you get it. That's my review of Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal. It's a fantasy movie for families. And maybe you have your own Dark Crystal review that you want to do. Maybe you've seen some more direct videos. I could try, maybe I could leave some links to other videos that are just more direct, that show you clips, videos that have been struck down but are like put up before. So, and you know, that's the world of the Dark Crystal. Security cameras everywhere, exporting pod people to replace the Gelflings, outright having the Gelflings be killed, having a series of small-scale conflicts at all levels in every country on the planet Thra, so that they can have the Skeksis can have their new management system put in place, which will be a downgrade, because, you know, like the Skeksis hold people down and keep them repressed, and, you know, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And then put them in charge and say, well, if you want to be in charge, you got to do what we say. And the Skeksis want blood, and they'll whatever means necessary. And, you know, look at them, you can tell. So that is the world of the Dark Crystal. Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal. thank you for watching. We have to do something about this. They're forcing conflicts. And a lot of the pod people rip everything. Even animals and beasts and other creatures, like, they're pretty gross, and they eat shit. It's part of their religion, and they worship demons, and they screw animals to death. Like they gang. They get together as gangs, and then they molest animals to death. Animals, like, you know, 4-legged creatures, 12-legged creatures because they're fantasy creatures on the planet Thra, 5-legged creatures because they're puppets, and they just grab like and they bang on them till they die. And that's their part of their religion of worshiping demons. And they eat poop. And again, I don't hate people. I hate the programs. I hate what the people are doing. And the people do those things because of how they're programmed. And we have to keep that in mind. But also probably, you know, they're going to have to be rounded up. And the president of the Gelflings is not going to help because he also kisses the ass of the Skeksis. And all the tech guys, like, you want to downgrade tech, put pod people and make pod people your Silicon Valley tech guys. So they're doing that, and it's a downgrade. But it doesn't matter because a lot of the tech, like the AI models, and they all come from the Crystal Castle where the Skeksis live. So they develop all that stuff through witchcraft and Skeks magic and sorcery, and then so they have control over a lot of that stuff, and then they export it to the world. And what they want to do is decide who gets what. So they're using the pod people who eat shit and worship demons that live in the most densely populated country on the planet Thra to do that. I'm sorry, I keep repeating it over and over again. But so many people are autistic. That's how you explain stuff. Like a school teacher to special needs children, you keep saying, and I know that you're not special needs or autistic. And if you are, well then, no offense, I'm trying to explain something to you. So I hope you get it. Do you get it? It's a fantasy movie for families from 1981. Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal, reviewed. It's coming for you. The Dark Crystal is coming to a town near you. That is all.